What's up, Houston, Texas? Julio Vela here with the latest and most fashionable and the greatest HCCLA reasonable doubt from the underground coming up from the pandemic. Let me say hello to our co-host Justin Harris. How you doing?
I'm good. I got nothing else on that.
Surviving? I mean, look, you know what? It reminded me a little bit of Brendan Fraser. What's that movie called? Brendan Fraser, he's in the ice and then he comes out and
Encino Man?
Casino Man.
And Encino Man.
Encino Man.
Encino, right. California. Yeah.
Justin Harris, you make it okay? How are you doing? Let's talk.
Yeah, man. Just like you. Brother. Just like you, my house got totally words I can't use on TV up on from the ice storm 3 weeks ago. That was crazy.
Have you seen that some of them Texas memes?
Yeah.
Like it's like hurricane, like ready, winter's coming. But then like freeze, it's like, oh, I have no heart from the Wizard of Oz. Who's coming in? Look at that. We have
Pat McCann
coming in through David Ryan.
How are you boys?
Hey,
we're
brother.
Good. Glad to see you were wearing your mask.
Pat, how are you, sir?
Is that a knife?
Good.
Is that a knife?
How are you guys?
We're good.
Oh,
can you hear us?
Pat,
yeah. No.
Did you fare okay during the freeze?
Yeah, we're builders. We actually got groceries in ahead of time. So,
hey, enough toilet paper?
Yeah, toilet paper. And I think the other thing was
that was their problem. Somebody wanted to take a crap. They were in that freezing atmosphere.
Oh, and let me introduce on the top end, Mr. Mark Pirtle from the Houston Media Source. How you doing, sir?
Doing well.
Running the booth. Mr. David Ryan, how you doing?
Gentlemen, how are you?
Good.
Hey, so first out the gate, did you, Mark, you want me to zoom in? Talk to us.
Turn your cameras.
Turn it.
There you go.
That's it.
That's better.
Okay, I'm gonna try.
I feel like that David and Pat. This is like that video from the court hearing in Michigan or wherever. Where it's like, wait, are y'all in the same house? Are y'all in the same house? You're not allowed to. We're gonna send the police over and knock on the door without any lawful authority to do that whatsoever. Y'all saw it. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, I saw it.
She shouldn't have answered the door. That would have been the best thing. Like, what basis would they have had? There's no exigency. They can see there's no exigency on the video.
Look, he came to he said, Judge, I'm sorry I lied. My bad.
I love how he had that cigarette. Like, all of a sudden, there's a cigarette in his mouth. And it's just like, like all subterfuge just went out the way. And it's just like, I'm sorry I lied, Judge. I'm sorry I lied.
Also on the live feed is Mr. Pat McCann. How you doing, sir?
Looks like you're doing pretty well.
Amen. David Ryan, how you doing, sir?
Doing quite well, sir.
Yeah.
This is where you're starting our St. Patty's.
This is the feedback. You're having feedback now. I'm going to sign out of this and go on to this one.
I think the feedback's coming from 2 microphones in the same room. But we're just going to make it work. We're going to make it work. These are COVID conditions. I'm in my living room with all of the furniture in my house.
Does anybody see me?
Yes. Are you walking downstairs?
Hey,
you're riding a kangaroo?
Is there feedback?
No.
Wonderful. Hey, trials are kicking effing up in April, man.
Well, are we starting on the serious stuff now?
No,
No.
one of you guys to close it, or go to the back and go to the rest, the back part. No,
Yeah,
well,
but that means we're not keeping our 6 feet.
Yeah, I'm sure that's something y'all, yeah,
Did that fix
that
it?
might work. Seems to have,
so let's talk about it.
but now we can't see anything but your mouth, David.
That's
Hey,
really
well-
all that's important.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
you
what they
walked
pay you
into
for,
that,
right?
Justin. You walked into
They,
that.
they pay you for that.
You walked into that, bro. So let
All
me
right, so
ask you.
we on TV yet?
Yes, sir. We've been live for the last 6 minutes.
Excellent. So did you want to talk about trials or not?
Yes,
Yes.
that's what I'm saying. So let me ask you this. From the get-go, as a defense attorney perspective, and across the April's coming, there are a lot of lawyers who are set for trial, misdemeanors and felonies. Should we or should we not, as a matter of our filings, file a objection to an NRG trial based on the latest case law and things that are coming in? Should we just file it as a matter of course, know that the judge is going to deny it, and
No.
should we file it anyway?
Why? No, and why? Look, all of these cases are going to depend on what the individual circumstances of your client are, whether the state has a weak case or not. If you have a client who is demanding his right to a speedy trial, and that client is competent and understands that he's sacrificing a speedy trial for a fair trial, or vice versa, and he makes choice to go with speedy, then fine. That's the important thing. And the most important thing is that if you've got a information or a sense that the state's case is going to fall apart, and you think that pushing it is to your advantage, go ahead. That's good lawyering. The problem is that no judge, whatever they think, has the right to try to force us to our health or our family's health or our client's health by trading what is a ridiculous situation, NRG, for the pretense of a trial. And David was there with me when we walked that place. And I'll let him describe what it looked like to you guys. But if you're going to fight it, then yes, file the objections. But if you have a reason to try and get to this trial early, well, good luck to you.
And just so you know, I don't entirely agree with Pat.
Tell us, Dave. Tell us.
I don't think there's anybody on this earth you entirely agree with, David Ryan.
That would be fair.
You'd agree with that?
Absolutely.
Oh,
I'm in the
Now-
same boat. I don't entirely agree with anybody either.
hey, look, tell us, David. What are you? Well, I don't necessarily entire. Other than me, like looking at Pat and being like, "Yes, wizard, yes." What do
Rick,
you? What
Rick
says
Wizard.
you? Because what says you as I reflect, Dave? Dave,
Then again, we're pulling up aside the curtain, and now we're seeing, who's really back there, and it's not the great and powerful Pat. Look at it this way. Look at it this way. I spent 7 weeks in quarantine. I spent an additional 120 days under a doctor's care. I will be filing that objection, and I am not showing up in that building. They can come to have the deputy come pick me up and take me to the jail. I am not taking a jury at Energy, period. My client decides he wants one, fine. He's going to go with a different lawyer because I'm going to withdraw. I am not going down there. The science, which is what we should be going on, does not support at the moment that kind of gathering, number one. Number two, the U.S. Constitution certainly does not support this.
Expand on that. The constitutional argument.
Well, I don't see how you can possibly effectively give counsel to your client when you're trying to pick a jury that you can't see. I don't see how you have the right of confrontation when
Okay.
witnesses are wearing masks. when the jury is wearing masks and you cannot read people's faces. Remember, that's a lot of what we do is reading the faces, reading the body language. You can't do that when people are covered up.
What if they take their mask down to answer the question?
This is what I have found, that the can't get a fair trial argument is weighed against, look, I'm not going to NRG, has lost. The not going to NRG because of health reasons, I think, quite frankly, I think you have to win every time. I mean, if you have legitimate reasons for not going to NRG, that you're gonna win. If you couch it in, you can't get a fair trial. I think the judges say, nah, that's not convincing. Like, that's not fair.
Well, they can't. They can't grant that on the lack of fair trial because they have set up a system that they are guaranteeing will provide for fair trials. And if they grant even one continuance on the basis that the conditions of jury selection are unconstitutional, they have to grant every single one, right?
Right.
So you're never going to win on that argument because you're going to get the judges to admit that the system they've set up and signed off on is actually fatally flawed.
You win on that argument at the appellate court.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that's why I say I think we filed it anyway. In those cases, in those impossible cases, and this is for Pat, not the cases where we're going to hit an NRG trial, right? We're going to hit it because we got real issues. We got, not really, I don't mean to say that. We have the issues in that direction. So I've only tried 3, and I filed them in every one and I object, right?
Sure.
I'm just because the appellate attorney might have something else. I don't know, man.
Well, let me put it to you in a different sense. Were all 3 of those trials misdemeanors, or were any of them felonies?
2 felonies, 1 misdemeanor.
Okay. On the felonies, what was their exposure?
25 to life, no probation, no parole. 2 to 20, probation eligible for parole.
Okay, so you've got them all over the spectrum. You've got a misdemeanor where there's no cost to you filing because whatever happens to them will not be so devastating, unless it's an alien, that it won't be recoverable. On the other side, you've got what sounds like a sex crime.
Sex crime.
Yeah, so continuous act sexual assault. So again, no harm could come to your client, whatever happens. If you get a good result, then fine. If you don't get a good result, you've preserved error. Where your difficulty is going to come in is in your third case. Let's say you have a probation eligible guy on a felony, and you are attempting to get the right result on this, and you go in and you file your objections. Okay, great. You get a probation from the jury. What do you do? You know, does that make it a difficult choice for your client? Sure. So none of this is cut in stone. It's just that you got, and nobody has a right to risk anybody's health in this situation. And David's 100% right about the conditions, because we went and saw them at NRG. And, you know, all due respect to the judges who may have thought they licked this problem, they did not. It is a horrible situation, and no one could possibly pick a fair jury in that situation. The only good thing is that the same limitations in some ways apply to the state. But the jurors themselves that show up are shitty for us.
Right.
Where, when and where? I mean, y'all went to NRG, but when did y'all go? What did y'all see? Talk to us about it.
David, you want to take it?
So they've got it set up basically in 3 different areas. There's a 4th area that's stadium seating. The rest of them It's just a giant hall. And the chairs are set 6 feet apart from each, all the way around, with pillars up and around. Even one of the judges who's been forcing trials down there said, you can't see everybody. Okay, so how could you possibly conduct court dire? They said they just put all.
David, we're having problems with your audio, brother. We're having problems with the audio. Pat, can you go down there with him?
All right. Is mine coming through okay?
Yes.
Yeah, but just mute, Pat. If you just mute yours,
well, what we saw there, and David was the one who signed both of us up for this. We went and actually sat through all the places and stations they would have to go. Imagine trying to read body language on one half of a football field while everybody's masked, and there's noise from the other two jury selections going on next to you, bleeding over, because all they separated by is a sound reducing curtain that has gaps at the top and the bottom. So it is generally a waste of space and time, as far as
and a lot of money.
And a lot of money. I mean, the cost of keeping NRG and the constables paid while they do this is absurd. So this is the illusion of a solution that could be solved far more easily. For instance, if the judges and the DAs could simply stop fighting with the sheriff over who needs to get out.
Right.
Because then the pressure on speedy trial wouldn't be so bad.
Well, and that's, it sounds like you said earlier, Pat, that they tried to solve a problem and they failed miserably, or something along those lines. I'm grossly shortening what you said, messing it up. But if they, it sounds like they tried to solve the health problem without any consideration to the constitutional rights issues. And they may have potentially set up a safe way to do this, but it's at the expense of all the reasons why we're doing this in the first place.
Exactly.
Right?
It was more for expediency of the civil bar than it really was for the constitutional rights of the accused.
Right.
That's incredible. That's an incredible statement.
And that's our problem here, is that they were just trying to figure out a way to do it where we could not transmit a virus during a global pandemic, which is redundant, but during a pandemic, and they just had no consideration for the rights of a defendant in a criminal case. And you mentioned the speedy trial rights and the issues of people who are in custody, but as far as in the misdemeanor courts go, we've had misdemeanor judges on the show who admitted that all of the trials that they'd been pushing were people who were out on bond. And none of the parties to the case were chomping at the bit to go to trial.
Look at most of the cases that have already been scheduled to go starting in April. Most of them are bond cases.
Mm-hmm.
That's what
all but
I'm
two of mine
about.
are.
Another
I got
thing,
a dozen cases set, and all but two are all on bond.
Stop these games they're playing and just go ahead and start making some reasonable offers. I mean, when you're offering a guy a year state jail who's out on bond, why is the guy going to agree to go into custody now?
Right.
It's real.
Well, here's the question. Do you think that once these trials start dropping, because April's going to be nasty for a lot of people, will the district attorney's office just start to be reasonable with their offers that they're making to dispose of cases? And I'm not talking about conviction offers, okay? I'm talking about, where's the class? Where's the reduction? Where are the real offers? Because they cannot litigate all of this. There's no way. Thoughts? No?
Yes, you're right. They can't. I don't know there's no reason behind what they're doing right now.
Well, we have two capital lawyers who take capital murders on the show. Let's talk about the most serious. So we were talking about some of the misdemeanors who are just as serious in people's lives, but let's talk about when it's life and or death. Do you see your all's capitals going to trial, or is this
No one with a blick of sense is going to try a death penalty case in these conditions, period. The next thing is that if you're trying a capital murder case, one of the difficulties, I understand and respect the reform that was instituted, we now have to negotiate with a capital committee, which means when you have 4 or 5 people in a robbery crew, 2 shooters, 1 driver, a planner, and some schmo who stole a car, it's very tough to negotiate and work through this, which is why we still have a backlog of several hundred cases on that. That said, I am hopeful that a lot more attention is going to be paid to the first degree stuff that has lingered and to the non-death capitals that are lingering. Because you're right, they are very serious cases, and none of them appear to be in a place where the DAs want to move them at this point. I don't know when that's going to change.
2 things. The first one is I have seen, and then an abrupt halt to the Southern District feds picking up, engaging in organized criminal activity, murders, some of the things that happen across state lines. So they were picking up. U.S. Attorney Patrick retires, and then suddenly I still have some. Suddenly, it's a big question as to whether or not the feds are picking those kind of cases up.
They're still picking them up. Just got a new one. So it will slow, I'm sure, as the priorities of this administration are going to be different than the last. So I would anticipate that Project Gun, which has been hitting a ton of federal robberies under the Hobbs Act with gun enhancements, will slow.
So I don't know much about the Hobbs Act, okay, but from what I understand is when something, correct me, and if I'm, please correct, criminal activities happening on across state lines, here comes the Hobbs Act, and they just bring everybody in.
Yeah, it's basically anything that affects interstate commerce. That's how they get a Hobbs Act.
Interstate commerce, always coming through.
Anything.
Always coming through. So that's that point. And the other point I forgot, that the feds aren't picking up a lot of cases, and so the state, those super old cases, they're getting kicked to emergency docket. And we have mixed reviews on the emergency docket. Pat, I don't know if you've been there. David, Michael, Ryan, I don't know if you've been there. Justin, I don't know if you've been there, but they send you to the emergency docket, and you're stuck, and then you're like popping the emergency docket, and Judge Bradley's there telling you like, here we go, or Judge Velasquez or Judge Yates or Judge Belinda Hill, and they've all been great and they're awesome, but it's a different kind of perspective because suddenly this emergency docket, they're trying to eliminate a lot of the cases where some of the co-defendants have been are gone to the Fed courts. And these cases are here 2 or 3 years later, and they involve, big time, big accusations. I don't know if you have opinions or thoughts on the emergency court that's been established.
Let David take that.
Okay, I've been in front of the emergency docket, and as you said, some of the judges on emergency docket have been very good. They have realized that it is not the defense. It is the state that has not provided evidence that has been requested under the Michael Morton Act, which I hope we'll get to talk about that great decision that came down last week. So some of those judges are great at that. Some of them are more about, pushing what was the old, I'm a former prosecutor who's now wearing a black robe. So I'm still a prosecutor. I just wear a black robe. And they are trying to push more of that on us. The concern on the emergency dockets is at least one of those judges is talking about that judge wants to actually keep the cases that have been assigned to her from the emergency docket. And I don't have a problem with people who have a problem with that particular judge. I mean, let's be honest. Some of those judges, which you've named, Belinda Hill, Mark Carter, Mark Brown,
Judge Yates, Judge Velasquez, Judge Hill.
Yep. I mean, those were, they're
good judges.
There are 4 or 5 judges in the CJC who've been elected that I'd much rather go to those judges because I know I'm going to get a fair trial.
Yes.
I know I'm going to get a fair punishment hearing. Then again, there are some of those judges that have been assigned over there. I don't want them anywhere near my case. I don't want them hearing motions. I don't want them sitting over voir dire. I don't want them hearing anything, and I'm sure as hell not going to them for punishment.
Well, and I think so we've had other counsel say, look, if I'm going to file a motion to suppress, or I'm going to have certain types of legal issues, I need to know who the judge is going to be, because if I think I'm going up in front of Judge so-and-so, and I know that I got a shot at this issue, if at the last second I'm turned and get sent up to somebody else, my whole idea of presenting the case might flip. And that's a real concern for me. I'm just saying.
Yeah, you might be trying the case so that someone like Pat can take over the writ versus trying the case with a real expectation that illegally obtained evidence will be suppressed.
Well, I'm going to preserve everything. I'm going to preserve everything for Pat to come on in.
Yeah. But you also have to remember, though, that, you might have a shot at the intermediate courts of appeals, the 1st, the 14th. But the CCA is still dominated by former prosecutors who never practiced criminal defense.
Right.
And I think on the decision we saw about the choking cases, you can see where some of those divisions lie, and where things have been taken away that are advantageous to the defense and sometimes advantageous to the state. So it all depends on whether a PDR winds up getting granted on your guy's case.
So let me ask you something before we go on to a different subject, because I do want to talk about 3 cases that came down, or 3 topics. I don't know the cases, but y'all will. But just playing devil's advocate here and just thinking about this, capital murder trials with death penalty being sought, the voir dire is individualized voir dire. Do you think that under COVID that maybe those should actually be the only cases going to trial right now? Because they could be done safely? You don't need large groups of people together?
No, I understand your reasoning, but the problem is that you still want as much as possible to use your strikes in a cohesive manner rather than strike as you go. Although that is the old way of doing it. The second thing is that of all the times you want jurors to not be afraid for their own safety would be a death penalty trial. And the jurors that could sit on a death case, think about this. You're exposing communities of color to a greater risk. So there's an excellent chance that they will either not show or, volunteer to get off if they have a genuine fear of COVID. You've also got a potentially really unbalanced pool that shows up. And of all the times you want a cross section of the community, death penalty trial is another one. So
makes sense.
Honestly, the COVID has been 1 year, one horrific, mind-numbing, ready to be done with it year, but no capital trial will suffer and be unprosecutable in a year. And any
Sure.
prosecutor who says that is not really being truthful, because they sat on some of the most horrific cases, including Lucky Ward, for 7
years.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For
So,
years.
so spare me the quick, we need to get justice for these victims argument, because it's not true. So none of these cases need to go, except a few of the civil cases where they won't settle until there's a trial. And maybe a few folks that are sitting in jail needlessly for something they didn't do on a minor offense. Absolutely.
I like that. That's one of the most articulate things I've ever heard regarding why we don't have to force or push people to trial.
Right.
And let me bring it a little bit more real world. First, those motions we talked about earlier that the judges are saying, no, you didn't get a fair trial. Remember, it is heightened scrutiny on the appeal because death is different.
Right.
What judge really wants to say, yeah, we're going to force you, even though you're getting individualized or dire, to try it during this, and then have, whether it's a state court or the federal courts, turn around and go, absolutely, his rights to due process, his right to confront the witnesses, his right to a jury of his peers was violated. We're flipping it. Because, again, it's heightened scrutiny on the appeal for a death penalty case. Now, let me give you a real world example for all this. So you've done your individual voir dire. You say, okay, that's a little bit different. Fine. Now you're impaneled. You've got one member of the jury who we'll say has allergies, and they start. What members of the jury are not going to be very, very concerned about that? I was in the grocery store yesterday, and there was a guy doing that, and there were literally people racing out of the aisle, just leaving their carts and going out of the store, because even though everybody was wearing masks, they didn't want to be anywhere near somebody who was coughing, who was dabbing their nose. Don't want to be near that. You're talking about a life and death decision, and your juror is more concerned about the juror on the end, or the bailiff, or the clerk, or the testifying witness who is got a runny nose, is hacking a little bit, got a little bit of a cough, and all they're concerned is like, oh my God, what does that person have? They're not listening to the evidence. They're not rendering a true verdict. They are not considering that the law actually demands life. You must actually go through a bunch of hurdles in order to give death. So that's why, echoing what Pat said, no court in its right mind is going to try a death penalty case under these circumstances.
Makes sense.
But why when I agree with you 100%. But why would a court at the same time try a 25 to life, no probation, no parole case the same way? Like, look, yes, like I'm talking non-death capital, right? But when the accusation, is sometimes worse in some people's eyes, why would they decide that the non-death capital is not okay, or death capital is not okay, and this other accusation that in some people's mind might be worse is okay to try?
I'll tell you why. And this is a really crappy reality of what we do. Please note, Justin, I said crappy, not the other word I would have used. Your guy who's 25 to life is not entitled to a writ lawyer at state expense. A death capital client is. So he's still working through the system regardless. The guy who's 25 to life has got to hire his own writ lawyer to go fight that. He ain't got that money.
Yeah, and that is
That's
effing
true. It's crappy and it's
terrible.
true.
That's effing terrible, man.
Pat, do you think, or David, but Pat, your email address is writ lawyer. So do you think that we're going to actually see anything from the last year or anything that goes forward ever reversed in state courts?
But before they answer, this is why I file those motions, because if it's strategy, I'm not going to do it, right? If I have any strategic reason, I'm not going to do it. But if I have any reason, like if I can't find any reason not to, I'm filing that thing because, like, I'm not going to be the lawyer who didn't file that when it's not appropriate in something that I think it's not appropriate. I'm filing that thing, dude, because I'm not going to be the lawyer who doesn't object to the NRG trial.
Right.
So I leave it. That's what I say.
I think you're going to have something come back where the error was preserved, like JV did, or when they don't preserve it, and it should have been, because it's going to be real easy to find folks that said, no, I wouldn't have gone in those circumstances.
Right.
So you think we will have some reversals?
Yeah, but again, the judges that are pushing for this, remember, a couple of the ones in the civil and criminal side, they're not thinking about the clients. They're not thinking about, I mean, they claim they are because they want to have a speedy trial, but they're perfectly willing to sacrifice a fair trial to get there.
Sure.
So that's not a really accurate statement that they're caring about the clients. Then the second thing is that when you look at this stuff, the judges that are hired to try these cases, it's just like when it was at impact court. No one wants to be the sticky, gear. No one wants to slow down. No one wants to say, you're right. In the interest of justice, we shouldn't go forward with this, because then they don't get paid.
Right.
So if you combine, I would call it political showmanship, which is all the NRG trials are, with the fact that the incentives for the visiting judges are exactly the opposite of ruling that a trial should not go forward or suppressing evidence. And they don't have to stand for election anymore because there's zero chance of any Republican being elected in Harris County for the next several election cycles.
You think so?
So that means that none of these folks have to worry about an election or an electorate.
Well, the Dems are I think some of the rumblings of the Dems are worried with some of the Dems themselves, and also the Republicans. I tend to agree. Like, Republicans, I don't know if they're going to win a seat in the next election cycle, but you think they're done for the next couple?
Oh yeah, at least
on the bench.
Yeah, all the major,
on the bench,
major
maybe the sheriff's office, maybe the DA, but I think the best shot at the DA's office being flipped back red was this last election.
Yeah, no, they're done for the foreseeable future.
What says you, David Michael Ryan?
Well, I agree with Pat. I always thought that Harris County would turn blue in 2022, but nobody saw Trump coming through, and Trump changed things. Better or worse, it doesn't matter. He changed things. Since the DA is a local position, Commissioner's Court would replace Kim Ogg if Kim Ogg retires, dies, moves on to another office. So, I don't see any countywide seats or judicial seats in this area going red again for probably at least 10 years.
Oh, but have you seen, they call it Breaking Bond on Fox News? Every night. It's called Breaking Bond.
This does not sound good. I haven't heard this either.
It's on Fox News. It's not on Fox News every night, and it's not called Breaking Bond. Where they air all the individuals, or Fox News airs all the individuals who've got on bond and then have committed another offense. And then they call the magistrates and judges out, put their mug, so to say, on the TV and say, so-and-so let so-and-so out. And then he committed another offense.
You're saying this is on a local Fox
they put
affiliate?
music on top of it. Pardon?
This is on a local Fox affiliate or on Fox News?
Don't Google Houston breaking bond.
Okay.
Jimmy,
Yeah.
I've seen that. And the problem here is that, once again, in order to sell advertising space, a journalist is, well, in my view, acting irresponsibly, because none of them present the hundreds and hundreds of people who've been given PR or extremely low bonds and who've gone out and very quietly went about their business without any problems.
And they do that all day, every day, Pat. You're right.
Nor do they point out the fact that if those people who broke bond had just enough money to post the bond, which they very well may have been able to do, that money on the line wouldn't have changed their behavior at that point. And leaving them locked up, if they didn't have the money, would be costing us probably more than, if I'm being really cynical, than that crime cost.
Well, remember, we do have actually some empirical studies that refute what they're saying. The court monitors from the federal courts on the misdemeanor bond supervision, for lack of a better word, have found the vast majority do not pick up new cases. They are not getting jail time. They are going on and leading productive lives. And there's always going to be one, and it's always going to be tragic. But that does not mean that one bad apple should spoil the whole barrel.
But isn't that the urban legend? Because I was a kid that caused the Republicans to enter into power in the early 90s.
Well, remember, times were different then. Remember, Bill Clinton, a Democrat, ran on locking up black people, picked the fight with Sister Soldier. That was what the early 90s was about, was at that time, lock them up, throw away the key, everybody's scared. We've become smarter since then. Even Republicans have come to realize that having the highest jail population in the world, I think maybe only China and Iran are worse, is not a sustainable solution. Okay, what we need to do is get more programs to change thinking, to make sure they have life skills that they used to get in high school when I went to high school, when Pat went to high school, probably not when you guys went to high school, and certainly not in the current high schools. When I went to high school, even boys had to take home ec. Hey,
look, I ain't taking the home ec, okay? I ain't taking the home ec.
Yeah, well, that's because you have a very good wife, but someday you have to put biscuits, my friend.
I'm kidding. But that's what happened. This is my understanding of what happened. The Dems came in. The media campaign started talking about PR bonds, and everybody's dying, everybody's getting killed. There was a big backlash. Republicans came in and they reigned for 20 years. And those principles, maybe not Republicans, but those ideas of, whoa, can't be giving people PRs. Am I wrong on that? Because that's what I've been told for the last 15 years.
Sorry, I'm back on.
Go ahead.
Pat and I have both been practicing long enough that we remember when Dems were on the bench before, and trust me, they weren't giving out PR bonds. Okay? That's not what happened back in the day. What happened was they were giving out a lot more probations, but there were no programs. Okay? So you're on probation, pay your fees, pay your fines, pee in the cup, and do your community service, and that's it. There was no WIMAC. There was no anger management classes. There was nothing to help change behavior. And let's give Kim Ogg credit where credit is due. As somebody who built a law practice originally representing strippers, hookers, porn stars, and massage therapists, I always used to argue to the jury that labeling a woman the most offensive thing you can in the law, a whore, doesn't help them. You're not helping anybody with this. Give Kim Ogg credit. She brought in a diversion program, which, don't get me wrong, did start under Republicans, but she massively expanded it. They started concentrating on the Johns, which is what I think they should concentrate on. And so we've seen some very good changes. Rick Court did start under Republicans, but it's been, again, expanded. Mental health court has been expanded. The wonderful Veterans Court that was started by Republican Mark Carter and my friend Pat McCann has had massive success for our veterans. Okay? Yes, there are those that still don't succeed, and that's a tragedy. But the more opportunity we give to correct bad behavior, because remember, at the end of the day, as Republican Judge Caprice Cosper used to say, pick your battles, Mr. Prosecutor. Is this somebody we're afraid of, or is this somebody we're mad at? We're mad at drug addicts. We're mad at prostitutes. We're mad at drunk drivers. We're afraid of murderers, rapists, and child molesters. Okay, and so the fact that we're giving people that are doing these more behavioral crimes a way to learn and change and modify their behaviors, I think goes much more towards what the criminal justice system should be, rehabilitative as opposed to punitive.
You think, I don't know, man. Spoken like a true Democrat, David Michael Ryan. No, but the truth is, dude, I don't know, man. I'm still getting stupid charges that are being filed. I don't know if there's communication from the bottom to the top. I'm concerned about the district attorney's attrition rate.
They want to jack their numbers up. That's why they're filing all these BS cases. She wants as many numbers as she can have to take back to commissioner's court to be able to get more money to hire all these new prosecutors. That's why we can't move cases. That's why there's ridiculous cases that are coming in. So, and then she turns around and on TV blames judges who find no probable cause where there was no probable cause in the first place. The judge didn't have to find it. It's glaring at everybody in the face. Well, intake being like career prosecutors being in an intake is a huge problem. Some of those people need to come out of intake for 6 months and, like, even if they don't try any cases, just see some of these cases through to the end, and then they'll go back to intake and see what they really should be taking, what they really should be declining.
Let's spread blame around where it justly belongs on the bond. Okay.
Yeah.
In the last set of Republican judges, only 2 of them had the guts, and they were 2 misdemeanor county court judges, to stand up and say, you're right. We should be giving PR bonds to people that are accused of minor crimes, provided there aren't other issues. When the scales flipped and the Dems came in, okay, on both the district and the county court level, there was a split. In fairness to the district court judges, they have more serious cases, but there is now a huge game of Heisman Trophy between all of the major politicians in this county that all want to be seen as progressive and thoughtful and reasonable, but nobody wants to sit there and actually release anyone except apparently the sheriff and the county commissioner.
Yeah.
And the sheriff came up with 1,600 people. This is a law enforcement career officer who came up with 1,600 people accused of felonies, looking at the exact same data that everybody else does, criminal history, tendency to show up, any skip bonds in the past, and said these 1,600 are people I would give PR bonds to. A cop.
It's incredible.
And, you know, the difficult thing here is that when one of the other sides suggests that they will think about 67 of them for agreement, that's not really as serious an answer as one would hope.
That's like asking, I countered with the engaging in organized crime murder today with the time served on a misdemeanor. It's like, yeah, all right. That's not a counter, and that's not a resolution. I agree with you, Pat.
I agree as well. So we got a few minutes left, but I would like to know if we can kind of geek out for a little bit and talk about some case law.
Yeah.
Was there an opinion that came down from the CCA on the state's right to a jury trial and their requirement to waive that? Did I miss that, or has that happened yet?
Do you mind if I take that, David? Yeah, you take that. All right. So there was a mixed bag from the CCA. There was a case that said absolutely under the code that the state must consent, and that failure to get their consent means that the judge, even under the COVID orders, cannot go forward and have a bench trial without the state's consent. Now, that's a pretty strong decision, one that's sadly going to require the ledge to rewrite the code to give that option back to the individual, which is where it should be, not with the state.
It's a due process right. The state doesn't have any right to due process. Only the individual has the right to due process.
You can say that all you like. The issue is not there. It's in the code now, and it's now been affirmed by case law. So unless you can actually establish a due process violation, which you won't, it's going to be upheld.
I know elation, okay?
So was that really a 9-0 decision?
Yep.
Jesus.
No hesitation. No hesitation. So
that means Bynum ain't getting to trial for a long time.
Yeah.
It means that, you know, when juries come back, he's going to have to give them some jury options. But, you know, he will have more energy. But there was also a great decision on discovery where
tell us about that one.
David Newell in the Watkins decision, over objections from several other of the judges, wrote a very thoughtful, long opinion tracing the history of the Michael Morton Act and the history of the prior case law decisions on discovery. And in essence said that Michael Morton rewrote the show, and we now have a statutory right to discovery far broader than the due process issues under Brady. Now, anything that's relevant to the case, and this was over punishment materials that were going to be used in evidence.
So let me ask you this. Okay, I want to be clear. Okay, so they give you notice of it, but they don't give you the judgments. Problem, right?
Yep.
They're like, hey, right?
Is that what the issue was in Watkins?
Problem.
No, well, it was actually booking sheets and fingerprint cards and the stuff they would use to prove up the prior crimes. And they did not provide it till day of trial. So the people that were on the defense end said this was unfair, that we had asked for this. It's certainly relevant and material. Material has now been deemed to mean relevant. And it's relevant to the case of innocence and to the case of punishment. So everything's on the tip.
So one of the things that I have been sitting on and been waiting to appeal, I haven't had the opportunity to, is the state of Texas will provide you notices of punishment evidence, but they will not fulfill the notice requirements under the code. You know, one of them being is not providing you with the actual fingerprint cards and things that they intend to prove up. But additionally to that is please forgive me, but in the code, it's like you need to provide the date, the time, the judgment, location of what you're going to prove. Typically, the state of Texas will simply provide to me just, hey, Harris County, extraneous. Harris
1998
County,
robbery.
right.
Yeah.
That's it. And I've been
You're
waiting.
going to have to litigate that, but you should be on solid ground with Watkins. But you need to start giving Watkins to your judges.
Pat, do you still
That's
do your
Hey,
Saturday
we got 2
morning
minutes.
case
We got
law?
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Emails?
2 minutes.
Pat, do you still do your Saturday morning case law emails?
I do. Do you want to be at it again?
Yeah. Does Fort Bend, are they the only ones who get that?
They're the only ones. I got tired of trying to share in the Harris County listserv because there's always some dumb motherfucker that sits there and decides he read the case better.
Please note, I didn't say that.
All right. It's all right. It's all right. The
That's
FCC
fine,
lets
that's
Pat
fine.
McCann get away with one. Yeah, I would love to get those. I loved reading those.
Hey, look, we have 2 of the best lawyers I've ever met in my life. Pat McCann, David Michael Ryan. Y'all are killing it. And I'm at my office. I'm going to zip over there and I'm going to slam one with you guys. I love y'all. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Justin.
I've only had one drink, so I just think you're okay. I don't love you.
Well, fair. And I swear, I'm not doing whatever the thing we said. What was the something I said?
You really have 2 minutes.
What?
Justin, send us out.
Yeah, I agree. We have 2 excellent lawyers coming on, 2 very close mentors to me. I would like at least collectively a quarter of what I am to them as a lawyer, and a few combat moves from Pat that I learned in bars. But yeah, thank y'all both for coming on and for the engaging conversation as well as the educational conversation. I'm not as good at send-offs or intros as JV. I'm not even supposed to be in front of the camera, but this is all y'all get. So me and my mustache will be here until my house gets put back together, and then I'll shave and try to get back behind the cameras one day. I don't know. We got 15 seconds left. What?
Come on down for one.
I can't come over there now. And I don't drink anymore. The world is a better place without me doing that.
We're getting Pat. You got any last words?
Great to see you guys. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah. Everybody stay safe. Don't get COVID like JV did.
Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association, reasonable doubt. Adios, amigos. Hasta luego. I'll see you in a bit.
Calling. Your